Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back to Serious Slack with Cerius Blaq. I am the host, Cerius Blaq, and today I'm doing something a little bit different. I am hosting an online panel, and the subject matter, as you saw in the title, is Are Kaiju Considered Monsters? Now, to have this discussion, I brought in some friends, and I would consider them to be experts, more of experts on this subject matter than I. So I will be acting as the moderator while I let them spill their guts over all of their knowledge on monsters and kaiju. So just we're going to start with introductions, and I would like to just start with Bill. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Bill MASUKU. I'm a comic book artist and writer from Zimbabwe. I have worked on Captain South Africa, Razor Man, Welcome to Dead World, and most recently, Tokoloshi Hunters, which is live on Kickstarter as at the 12th of October. Aside from comic work, I've worked as a storyboard artist for animation at Netflix and Disney, but I also just like fantasy in general, which ended up being one of the key motivators of all the creativity in my life. Mainly monsters and what it means to be othered, the different shapes and natures that they take, and what it means to be a hero in these kinds of worlds. So thank you so much for having me on this podcast.
Pleasure to have you here. I'm glad you're here. Patrick, why don't you go ahead next?
Hi there, I'm Patrick Lugo. Thank you for having me. I'm an author and an illustrator and a comic creator. I spent many years as the art director for a magazine that people may recognize as Kung Fu Magazine. That's where I was able to refine a lot of my comic skills, doing those how to defend yourself from a mugger kind of articles. But more recently, I've been doing some graphic novels. My most largest one is called A Tiger's Tale. But as of October 2025, I'm kickstarting my first actual floppy comic. I haven't had a traditional comic out since the 90s, and that's called Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer, which is also on Kickstarter.
Awesome, thank you. Just Slack Pack, that's my audience, by the way, the Slackers or Slack Pack. I will be putting the links to these Kickstarters in the description, and I'll probably add some examples as well for you to look at later. Next, let's go with Gretchen.
Oh, hi. I am less qualified. I am a podcaster. I was formerly on the show, the Kaiju Cast, for 5 years. My background, I guess, is more of I've started off as talking about Bechdel tests and women in horror, and I'm on 2 shows currently. I do the Check the Gate podcast, as well as Gwen and Gretchen Watch Movies. I'm a voiceover actor, as well as I get pinged for random panels at Comic-Cons, especially like these. Also, I'm currently writing a tokusatsu horror book, talking about just a reference novel about tokusatsu films and like horror genre.
Awesome. Gretchen also forgot to mention that she's also a film judge.
Yeah, I'm a film selection judge for 3 film festivals now: Portland Horror, H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival, and Seattle Crypticon. I'm one of the new programmers for that.
All right. And last but certainly not least, my man Ben. Ben, say hello.
Hello, I'm Ben Crane. I'm a writer and editor of prose and comics, and I'm doing this after a career in film where I was a development executive. Most relevant to this discussion, my academic background, I have degrees in film theory and literature, both with a focus in genre theory, which is sort of the study of how do we categorize things, and then also what do those categories mean? Like, what is the value that we get from categorizing things? What do we learn from saying, what is a monster and what qualifies as a monster? And what does that say about us and what we get out of that art? So I'm going to be coming at this from a very aesthetic philosophy point of view, which I'm looking forward to.
Excellent, excellent. And actually, you just mentioned something, because that's something you just mentioned something which is where I wanted to start, which is, what is a monster? Like, what do you can? So the first question: what is a monster? And when you think of the word monster, what immediately comes to your mind? Patrick, let's start with you.
A monster is definitely something that exists outside of the normal rules of, a given scenario, right? So within the bounds of fiction, you've got like your normalized reality, and then the monster exists outside of that. Um, what I've always found interesting is how, like, if you start breaking down how different cultures look at, define their individual realities, then how they define a monster also changes, you know. And I mean, we could see that in terms of like the difference between Bram Stoker's Dracula and, say, the Dracula from, not the Dracula, but the vampire from the Twilight series.
That's a whole nother discussion. That's a whole other panel at some point, but we'll get there. Maybe we'll have a round two for that. I have a feeling that's going to happen a lot during this discussion. Bill, what say you? What do you think of when what's a monster to you? And give me an example of something you automatically think of.
Okay, so I think just because it's been put on the table right now, just at like a super high concept level, the lack of cultural empathy intersecting with an absence of knowledge. So for me, a lot of the monsters that exist in Africa, or Southern Africa specifically, are usually like warnings. Don't do this because this will happen. And they usually ascribe that to this creature that, whether someone sees it or not, it now becomes the personification of that danger. Obviously, I'm going to point to Tokoloshi because I've been working on Tokoloshi so much right now. Those are a Southern African kind of monster. They're close to gremlin, definitely associated with witchcraft, and it becomes this lesson for children. And then as you get older, it's like, oh, that's why we do that. So a parallel right now is that there's this monster called Pinky Pinky. Silly name, but horrific consequences if you cross it. It's a bathroom Tokoloshi that if you go to the bathroom alone, any girl's bathroom alone, this thing's going to get you. And get you means several things.
See, that's the worst kind. So go ahead.
It is the worst kind. When my pants are down, the dignity, the lack of dignity.
We're so vulnerable. Anyway.
So, but it like you see it in pop culture where it's like girls/women will get up and go to the bathroom together, right? And I understood that as be safe rather than, oh, this has to happen. It's more of a safety, cultural binding, watch each other's backs sort of thing, because the monster is the consequence of not abiding by rules, like Patrick was saying, the norms that have been set up by your society.
Okay. Ben, how about you? What are your thoughts on this?
So I promised an academic approach to this. I'm going to be drawing for this definition on the work of Noel Carroll, and I'm going to be drawing on him a lot in this conversation. Okay. He wrote a book called The Philosophy of Horror, which is a really, really fantastic examination of horror stories and monsters and why we derive pleasure from a objectively unpleasurable experience of being scared. And his definition of a monster, I think, works very, very well and sort of slots neatly into what Patrick and Bill were both talking about, which is he focuses on the interstitial nature of monsters, that a monster is something that cannot easily be defined. That as humans, we naturally tend to place things into either or categories. Okay. The simplest is, this is part of my, my world or not part of my world. A monster is something which exists between those categories. So Dracula is neither alive nor dead. He is some other thing that exists between those things. Any of your undead monsters, zombies, are neither alive nor dead. Frankenstein's monster is neither alive nor dead. He is neither the bodies that made him up nor some other an otherly defined thing. He exists between the things that make him up and his own being. So a monster, to me, when we're talking about it in this narrative context, a monster is something that violates our understanding of the world as fitting neatly into categories.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, I like that take. Gretchen, last but not least,
Wow.
I'm sure you have. No, you're fine.
Man alive. Well, you guys have covered the gamut of what monster represents, right? So I guess I will go pull from personal experience. I think that my own interpretation of monster is also falls in the idea of like a morality warning, like you were saying, Bill, about using as a childhood scare you straight or scare you off the track that you're not supposed to be on. Like I grew up in the South, so for me, like the whole like the Jack Johnson story of like a devil at a crossroads. Like for us in the South, like a very that is the ideal of a monster, that you're having this is a warning for you that if you go off the path or if you diverge from the path. So yeah, that would be my interpretation.
Okay. Well, with that being said, I think because both now Gretchen and Bill have touched on this, we've all heard the phrase boogeyman, right?
Right.
Stuff like that. So, like, would examples of various boogeymens also be considered monsters, or do they fit more with what Ben was saying? Because some of them are neither alive nor dead in some cases, but where does a boogeyman fit in?
I feel like
anybody
that works. I think that works. I mean, the boogeyman is a monster in its own right. I mean, like in Japanese, like where a little bit of my knowledge about Japanese culture is that there's the term bakemono, right? Like, so that talks about multiple, motogari, or multiple terms like obake, like, are just a generalized word for. And then.
No, okay. I do have a question for you, because I'm looking for some feedback myself, because like I said, you folks to me are the experts, and I have a monster of my own that's been plaguing me since my growing up in Chicago days, and that would be this gentleman here. Okay, Candyman to me, I think fits into what you were just describing, Bill, and what you were mentioning as well, Gretchen. This is a boogeyman, but also horrific. And is he considered a monster?
He's also a ghost.
He's right. Okay, see, he's also a ghost. So Ben, does that like go along with what you were defining as well? Because he's also a ghost?
I think so. So the important part of a monster for my definition is revulsion. That we have a evolved revulsion to things which do not fit into our categories because we don't know how to respond to them. And bodily fluids are a really good example of this. Like when the bodily fluid is in your body, or excrement, when it's in your body, that's totally fine. Like we might not like thinking about it, but it's okay. But then the moment it leaves your body, if you see a pile of feces on the sidewalk, or if you leave a pile of feces on the sidewalk, that is disgusting. You feel revulsion to that. And you feel that because it is neither you nor not you. It used to be you, but now it isn't anymore. And that inability to determine what this is, it leads to this feeling of revulsion, because from an evolutionary standpoint, that was a dangerous thing.
Wow.
A food which we don't know, like a food which is partially decayed, moldy food is neither food nor not food. We feel far more revulsion to moldy food than we do to a rock which has some mold growing on it. And that is because we have evolved to say, don't eat the moldy food, where we don't need something to say, don't eat the moldy rock. Like, we're not going to try and eat the rock.
Someone needs that lesson, though. Someone needs that warning.
I was just gonna say that, but I was like, I don't know. There's a lot of warning labels on things these days.
I think that ties into what both Bill and Gretchen were talking about as monsters as cultural warning. That this revulsion that we feel towards them makes them incredibly good choices when we're trying to warn people of something. You put a monster on it, you inspire this feeling of revulsion, and then you don't go into the bathroom alone. Don't go wandering around the woods at night without someone to help you stay on the path. I mean, I started with, is Candyman a monster? And I don't know that particular monster, but he looked pretty revolting to me. There were a lot of signals of revulsion there. So I will say yes.
One more question for you guys. This is my cat Thursday. Is he a monster?
Only because he's on your laptop or on your keyboard, yes.
Right? Yeah. I just thought that was a perfect photo. I just happened to capture that one day. And I'm like, I mean, he's an asshole, but I don't know if he's a monster. But, I thought it was put it up for consideration. So.
I mean, or maybe in this instance, I mean, maybe the cat's behavior is monstrous, but maybe we would consider it more of a like a natural phenomenon, which comes back to the C word. Right.
Yeah.
That difference. And I mean, and the reason why I keep bringing it up, because like I get, some of what Gretchen said, right, really stuck with me in that if what defines a monster is also based on like the guide rails of a culture, like how different cultures are gonna just based on their value systems are gonna define monsters differently. And that makes me think of yokai in Japan, and what's the other term, that the kami, which is part of Shinto belief system, right? These are the kami are the spirits that inhabit various parts of nature. It could be a waterfall. We can think of it like in European folklore, like the dryads, right? The tree spirits.
Yeah.
Right. And so those aren't necessarily considered monsters, but they can still be dangerous. So like in Japan, there's like the concept of a yokai kind of bleeds into ghosts and undead, but it also moves into such things as like nature spirits and their versions of dangerous Bigfoots. The one that comes to mind would be a kappa, right? Which is a creature that's found in rivers and lakes, and they're like a humanoid turtle, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle style, but they have a hollow head that holds water in that head, right?
That's right.
That's what gives them their might, and they're pretty much invulnerable. So if you fight them, they'll take you apart.
Take your Shirikodama.
Respect, right? If you show them respect by bowing, they'll do the same. They'll bow to you, spilling that water. And, therefore, by showing them, rather than trying to fight them, showing them respect actually defeats them. So it kind of ties into what Bill was saying about how the creature represents a certain rule system, the right way to deal with a stranger, right? Start with respect. But then there's still that kind of supernatural danger, because if you go deep into the research of kappa, there's a whole ecosystem. The river kappa is different than the lake kappa, and some of them, are more inclined to pull a swimmer down under the water, and while others are a little bit more very specifically freaky, right? So there's like a whole kind of lore.
What you mean? Hang on. No, don't slide past that. Don't slide past that. Don't slide past. What you...
Really? How'd I do?
Fantastic.
No, you good. You good. I just have a sub question. What you mean freaky? What freaky?
Freaky how?
I can answer that actually.
Okay.
The
Sliding
the soul gem that's inside your body that the kappa feeds upon. They suck out of your butthole. Called the shirokodama. Yeah.
Okay, well, that wasn't something I was expecting to learn today.
Hey, man, you're learning. And like they would carve cucumbers because Kappa's favorite food is cucumber, and they would carve cucumbers to look like people and throw them in the water, like for rituals and whatnot.
Wow, Ben, did you know that?
Dude.
Yeah, I know this is all exciting new knowledge.
Gretchen, that was a great alley-oop.
That was okay.
Yeah,
I know a few things about yokai.
A little bit.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that's interesting because this is the perfect segue into the question, right? Because I was mentioning earlier, like how the languages reflect the value systems, and so
Well, when you were saying earlier about talking about the word kami not only means deity and god, it also means hair, paper. So things that are important in their culture, like tended to be have somehow brought the name kami, and so it's like you associate like hair with god, and like it's kind of ominous with the deity aspect.
Dope. Okay, interesting. Okay, so let's segue into what I think is next, which is like we obviously are here to talk about kaiju as well. So we've talked about monsters. So why are kaiju considered different to some people, and like what is a kaiju?
Ooh.
So let's just go start with Bill.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it's fine. It's fine. No, I'm still back there with the freak out. So I don't have like such a solid answer because it sounds like the rest of the panel do have like abstracted / philosophical / academic answers. I'm just gonna come at it from like my own perspective, which is based on the conversation we're having about like cultural boundaries, about what we consider othering. Kaiju are, for the most part, and I say for the most part because dragons show up in all cultures and those are big enough to be kaijus. For the most part, kaiju are like fiction. All of these are fiction, but what I mean is like it's entertainment. Like when I think if you look at like Norse mythology, then you're talking about like giants specifically. Mm-hmm. But are giants in Norse mythology kaiju? Technically, sure. I mean, if you put them in like a wrestling fight, it's a crazy SummerSlam showdown, right?
I kind of want to see that.
I do. But a lot of these creatures, you bring up Candyman, you bring up the Crossroads. These are things that are experiential, and then you pass them on, and then the word of mouth kind of warps over time as it's passed from one author to the next. But with kaiju, like a lot of the time, sometimes it's like an alien, and then it's like, are aliens in the same classification as what Ben was saying in terms of like mummies, vampires, which are undead because they're not of Earth, but they're not of their own planet, like that. Like I don't know, like I want to learn about that section because if the monsters, if it's just bigness, I don't think that's a qualifier for kaiju, right? Because again, I mentioned dragon, and dragons pop up in cultures that never interacted in history, and it's like, winged serpentine-like creature that's massive, which again qualifies as a kaiju, and that is cultural, but it doesn't fit like the definitions which I've heard right now. So I'd love to hear from other people.
And before we continue, because I do want to hear the rest of your answers, but it was something Ben mentioned to me that we should have done at the beginning, and I just remembered. My apologies. But like with this discussion, like where does everybody stand on is this a discussion of for or against? Like, what is your feeling of are kaiju considered monsters? Yes or no? Before we can consider the discussion. So, just go around and, Gretchen, we'll start with you. Do you consider kaiju monsters?
Not technically, no.
Okay. Ben, same question to you.
I will keep this brief and say I am leaning towards no, but I am very excited to hear, especially Gretchen and Patrick, to hear your definition of kaiju, because I have come to this conversation with a very clear understanding in my own mind of why in Western art we deal with monsters. I don't have as clear of an idea of the artistic intent of kaiju in Japanese culture and Japanese art.
Okay.
So I'm excited to hear what that is, and then I will try and sort of compare that and come to an answer. But my inclination would be no, kaiju are different from monsters.
Okay. What about you, Bill? What do you think?
I'm gonna
mention.
I'm a fence sitter, but if I'm gonna lean one way, like Ben said, I think I'm gonna lean yes, just because contextually within Africa, like maybe the way that we interact with just animals in general is a little bit different than like Westernized standards. So like a very clear example is just like pets and dogs. For a lot of people, like pets are people, like that's family. And then like a lot of people in different countries, like no, that we've othered them from ourselves. That's not your homie, that's not your friend, that's not your pal, that's not your chum. And given that not human classifies as monster, is like dangerous, and all the other things that we've made synonymous here, because dog barks, I don't know what you want. Is Billy stuck in a well, or are you hungry? Like there's that language barrier. And like it came up very slightly earlier when Patrick was talking. He used the word dangerous a couple of times, and then I was like, is monster synonymous with dangerous? But then is monster also synonymous with non-intelligence? And then Ben brought up like Dracula, and that's obviously like he's debonair. And so I'm gonna lean yes, that monster, because not human and dangerous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Patrick, what say you? Do you think kaiju are considered monsters?
I would lean. I mean, I would try and lay it out within a spectrum. And so, but kaiju, by virtue of their impact in a given scenario, right? While their intent may not be as malevolent as a Dracula, right? The result, right? The impact, that leveling of a city is monstrous, full stop. So more likely a monster than not. But I mean, we've seen other examples of kaiju that can be reasoned with. Mothra comes to mind, Gamera comes to mind. So I think it dovetails with some of what what we've been talking about in terms of like that spectrum. Like, we know to not invite Dracula in through the front door, and so we can kind of mitigate the evil that he represents as a monster. So in a yes-no scenario, yes, but I always try and add more nuance to it, like how monstrous is a kaiju, or that's where I think the power of the word comes from, because it represents something different, right? It's also that a little bit of that natural phenomenon. Is a hurricane a monster? But a hurricane can level a city.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, while you were saying that too, I also had an imagery of a kaiju ringing my doorbell. I just like, I'm not gonna let you in, but also I can't stop you from like I might not have a door by the time you're done. Okay, so thank you everybody for answering that question. It gives all of us, it seems like, a lot to think about as we continue this discussion. And I guess I want to pick up where we left off. And we were talking about, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Before that. Whatever, I'll figure it out. figure it out.
Wait, hang on. There is a slight segue, and I think Patrick was bringing it up earlier in terms of the word yokai has the same character kanji kai as kaiju, and we started speaking on the relationship between those two things.
Okay, let's talk about that. And also, with your examples that you share with me, let me know when is the appropriate time you would like me to present them, okay? Since now we're going to move into the topic of the relevance of the kai and kaiju and yokai, would anybody like to start to speak on that and give some background on their relationship?
Well, I was going to start by saying that, so for me, kaiju, as a kaiju fan and like talking about it on this podcast for a bazillion years, kaiju is an invented term it's like a subgenre of tokusatsu films. So tokusatsu is, I don't know how familiar everybody, I don't want to like bore us all the tears about talking about tokusatsu films, but generalized example, it means stunt show spectacular. And there are quite a few subgenres of those being like henshin and like sentai, and also like, so we have Kamen Rider, Ultraman, and Godzilla films, right? So those kind of fall into like the everything from kaiju to sentai to henshin. And kaiju films specifically are a Japanese invention. And would I say that there's a definition of like those being based off of using the characters of yokai? Absolutely, because yokai being the word, being strange and unusual, and like kaiju forming is from the word strange beast, right? So that being said, kaiju films are like they're generally like a societal fear, or like a litness of like what's going on societally speaking in Japanese culture. So can they be transverse to American culture? Like, yes, we have things we call kaiju, but like for all intents and purposes, at least for my opinion, is kaijus are pretty much a Japanese invention.
Okay. In that case, then, like Patrick, because you seem to know a little bit about this too. Like, where does yokai come in? Yokai is more of a actual cultural term, whereas Gretchen was saying that kaiju is more of a made up thing, but they're inspired by yokai. Is that what I'm getting? Is that what you think as well?
I mean, it's also kind of like ties intimately to the nature of Asian languages, which are kind of different than Romance languages. And if you look at how it's written, right, like when we write the alphabet, those letters represent sounds, and then those sounds represent concepts, right? But when you write the Japanese term, the character for yokai, right? Those characters they're pictographic. They represent specific, things. And then the word describes the thing, not the sound. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. When someone decided to make up the word yokai, they already had the word kai, which represents weird, supernatural. And the interesting thing is that those Japanese characters are also Chinese characters, right? So the pronunciation may be different, but the character remains the same. So it's that same pictogram that describes, the strange creature, yokai, but in Chinese, that same pictogram would describe Yao Guai, right? The difference would be in the pronunciation, but the concept is still the same. So a Yao Guai is also like a ghost and a cryptid and a monster, but it represents, because China is a continuous, is a society that's ancient continuously, right? Like some of those monsters represent value systems that are so deep in the past. We only know the monster because of the weirdness of them. Right.
Okay. Now this leads me to, like, Bill, I think this is where you come in, because you mentioned it at the beginning so he just mentioned that yokai are they have more of a cultural significance, and that was something that you touched on in the beginning when we were talking about just monsters and how their relevance is usually like a cautionary tale. And if I'm correct with my knowledge, like the monsters that you mentioned are similar to what Patrick was talking about with yokai. Is that correct, or do you feel there's a similarity there? Or
let me just clear my throat. The stalling. So now, absolutely, I believe that there's synergy there, and I think an interesting thing that's bubbling in my mind right now is how young America is. I don't have the exact age of America, but you guys know how old America is.
Mhm.
And depending on how young a civilization is, it's also how young their lore is, right? So like
Right.
there was a time where like cowboy films were like all the range. Like it's just they were as infestive as MCU movies are right now, right? But
Mhm.
the way that now people speak about cowboys, there's like a reverence, and we've lost a lot of like the humanity that came with highwaymen, sheriffs, and so on. Is more of like a now it's like a fabled black and white. Like you had to be a sheriff or you had to be a highwayman. But I'm sure, much like right now, whether you're talking about police systems or laws or rights, whatever it is, there's a deep humanity that makes everything this large gray tapestry. And so when I'm speaking about cultural phenomenon that's personified into these like fanged creatures, it's absolutely the same, because the word of mouth that travels in, especially like Bantoid language sets, so it's in Southern Africa. So we're talking Xhosa, Zulu, Shona, Venda, the way that it travels up this eastern side of the, or from the southern to the eastern side of the continent, all of those stories start to weave together as similar creatures. So like what Patrick is saying, when your languages are similar, your stories are also similar. So you may not find the same monsters in Ethiopia, right? But if you follow the trail, it's like, oh, this is the cousin of that, this is the cousin of that, and then eventually you see a similarity over the range of them, not between the two things. Again, so the relation between mummies and zombies far apart, but it like if you start doing the standard deviation, it's like, okay, I see a pattern forming here because of the cultures that were close to each other at the time.
Okay. Oh, thank you. That, yeah, I that tracks to me. And actually, it makes me think of, I saw something else too while you were also describing this, and it's something that Gretchen touched on, and I'd like to hear from Ben on this too. And you just mentioned it. So, like, how old America is, here's the thing though. America is a melting pot and always has been. And so, like, Gretchen mentioned the story of Jack Johnson and like the Crossroads Demon, right? And that's like a big Southern monstrous tale. But I don't think it started there. I think that all of the monsters here in America are carry-ons from all the other cultures that came here. What do you think, Ben?
I fully agree. I think that yeah, I mean, I don't have anything insightful or new to add on.
Okay.
You have hit the nail on the head, so to speak. America is a melting pot. We have become the dominant cultural force on the planet now, but our culture, the culture that we are exporting, is entirely an imported culture. We are taking, we are stealing the mythology of every other culture on the planet and sort of mashing it together into one thing and then sending it back out. And that's how you wind up with, in the Marvel movies, we have a Norse god fighting alongside a African king fighting alongside, a tech bro from
Right.
I don't know where is Stark from? I assume San Francisco, but
I don't know.
I thought it was SoCal.
So America. He's from America. He's so American. That, no. I mean, but then you throw in a character like Shang-Chi, and then he comes from the magical land, and and then, and I think I wanted to mention this. I wanted to show an example of this as well, because Gretchen, I think you mentioned this as well. We're going to talk about kaijus a little bit, and that's these Pacific Rim kaijus was America's version of kaijus, right? Like, just
King
out of,
Kong.
I
and
have
King
one
Kong.
question. Does King Kong count?
Well, yeah, that's what Gretchen just said. So,
Yeah, that's the hard one. Is like, so because King Kong shows up in Japanese films as, you know, Godzilla versus King Kong, the original one. Yeah. So I mean, I would say he gets a pass.
He gets grandfathered
He
in.
gets a pass.
He gets
it's
passed
a
in.
pass. Like, you cool, bro. Okay, but like,
You fought
do they-
Godzilla and a giant octopus. You're cool.
Does King Kong only get the pass because he was later adopted by Japanese film and brought into?
That's what I would say. Because technically, he's a monster, right? So he's like what of the story of like Joe. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on it. But there was that older King Joe, that older like stop motion. Or no.
Oh, wait. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, so like there was other like American versions of like the King Kong kind of era or King Kong kind of story. So I don't know if it's like, would you consider like Mighty King Joe, or is that what it is, Mighty King Joe? And
Mighty Joe Young.
Mighty Joe Young. Thank you. Wow. We'll find it there. It was Joe something. What's that?
You were right there. It's Mighty Joe Young.
It's a tip of my tongue. Right. But yeah, weren't those comics before? And so that was like what King Kong was like 39, something like that.
37, maybe 39.
37. Okay.
Not far away from Superman.
Right. But all of that predates like, you know, King Kong, or predates Godzilla.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. The only example of like I'm so sorry. The only example of like a kaiju film that there is a lost kaiju film that's called like The Great Buddha Arrival, that was like they've only found like stills of, and it was basically the Great Buddha that was on the hill in Japan, like walking down. And supposedly there was a SRS Cinemas did, I think, a remake of it that was really bizarre. But they pieced together like imagery and discussions and the thoughts about the film of people that had seen it. But apparently that film was lost to time into like a giant fire that happened.
Oh no!
But that was technically the first kaiju film, supposedly.
Okay. Do you think, just your opinion, everybody, is like those Pacific Rim monsters, like, were those well received over in Japan at all, or were they like, get that American bullshit out of here? I'm just curious. I
think they were confused. Like I've never heard the Japanese, like the audio of it. I'd like to hear the dubbing in Japanese, because I'd be curious to see if they call them kaiju, because that's what we called them in the movie here.
Right.
So I'd be curious to say, because it's such a different, yeah.
Okay, so right now, everybody, just a parameter check. Right now, everybody is still. Are you still kind of leaning towards? I think. Who had no? Raise your hand if you said no. Kaijus are not considered monsters. Okay, and yes, kaijus are considered monsters.
Right.
My hand's like this. Okay, just checking. Just checking where we're at. Okay, so here we go. We're going to keep going down this path. At this point, I'd like to show some examples of some things that each of you brought along, and I'd like to have you talk about them and what made you want to share this example for as part of this conversation. Ben, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, Ben. You brought the philosophy of horror image, and why this image, and tell us about it.
So I touched on this book already. As I promised, I'm bringing a academic bent to this, and this is one of the most thorough examinations of the aesthetic philosophy of horror that I am aware of. Okay. Which is sort of raising the question, why do we like horror movies when being scared is an unpleasant experience? And so this is going to get to when I said I'm leaning towards no, kaiju are not monsters, but I'm really interested to hear from people who know far more about kaiju film than I do. Carol's argument in this book is essentially that being scared is the necessary cost that we pay for what we really want out of horror movies, which is explanation and resolution. That we like horror movies because they present these monsters, these things which we cannot understand, which defy categorization. And by the end of the movie, we have reached some sort of resolution. We have answered the question, why does this monster exist? And that's what we want. What we want is that moment where things fall back into their categories, and the unpleasant experience of being scared is what we have to go through to get to that moment. So Dracula at the end of Bram Stoker's Dracula, sorry, I'm going to spoil the ending of a 160-year-old book now. Mina Harker traps Dracula in her bedroom as the sun is coming up, and she kills him.
Yep.
Because she has, over the course of the book, come to understand the rules that govern this creature that previously did not follow the rules of her world. But now she understands the rules that he follows, and she is able to put him back into her understanding of how the world operates. And in that moment, we get resolution and security and relief. And everything that came before that was just what we had to go through to get to that moment. And so I brought this book because I think it's a really fascinating piece of analytical and aesthetic philosophy. It has governed a lot of my understanding of how horror operates, but both my understanding and this book's approach is very Western focused. Carol knows far more about American and European horror than he does Japanese and Chinese and other Asian horror or African horror. So I'm really curious to hear how kaiju fit into their culture, and whether a similar argument could be made, or if they operate under different rules and towards a different purpose.
Awesome. Okay. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to that, or something they're thinking about?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I mean, as far as like what earlier I said, like kaiju films tend to be like a litmus of like what's happening in Japanese society, like it's reaction to Fukushima, it's a reaction to atomic war, to pollution, to like the greater global scale, because for them it's like the kaiju are such grand in structure that they are built of disasters or forces of nature or whatever is like you were saying earlier, Patrick, you said a typhoon could be a monster, is monstrous. It's like, so, but this is like almost like a personification of that. And I feel like that's a lot of times what they're perceiving with kaiju films. Is less a morality tale. Like there are Japanese horror films that are much more morality tales, like any of those, like Ringu, or talk about like a or Kwaidan, or those are all those are morality tales generally about like society, or like things that misgivings of like, you know, going off the path, to be very lightly about it. But like kaiju films tend to be more of a like a grand scale kind of situation, or like politics. There, I mean, most recently, like Shin Godzilla is a kind of a talk on Fukushima and how the government's reaction to it. So it was a very like, that film had the aspects of looking at government and how bureaucracies work and their reaction times to disasters.
Okay.
I'd be curious, Gretchen, if you think part of what makes kaiju as like a genre so popular is that it's so effective at like capturing like industrialization as a
Absolutely.
phenomenon. You know,
Absolutely.
like werewolves and vampires are so much like pre-industrialization, but there aren't very many monsters that really do a job of capturing like that, you know, what it's like to deal with a faceless bureaucracy.
I mean, have you seen Godzilla versus Hedorah or Shin Godzilla?
Not yet. Not Shin Godzilla. The other one a while ago. I've watched Godzilla -1 numerous times.
Oh, so good. And that's actually a good example of Godzilla as a monster. If we're going to talk, I mean, if we want to to backtrack myself, because I said, no, but I wasn't like a blanket no. It's, they can be monstrous, but are they like Western monsters,
Interesting.
Because Godzilla in that film is like that character, his reactions and his experience, like being a soldier that was a coward that faced a monster on an island that ate everybody. Have you guys seen Godzilla -1? I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is a crazy spoiler.
I was just saying.
That's all in the first
I never saw Godzilla eat somebody was in this. Just saying.
I've seen it, but I didn't.
I have seen it.
Okay.
Forcing myself to zone out.
Well, zone back in because I'm about to share some of your work, and I'd like you to talk about it.
Okay.
Well, Bill, I have a question for you.
I don't have answers, but go ahead.
I mean, I'd be curious. Like we were just talking about, like monsters as they represent industrialization. And I'd be curious if you can, look at your the monster lore you're familiar with, and if there's any mythology that might also slot within that same category.
Yeah, I mean, as I was listening in the zoned in parts of my brain, I was following right before Gretchen said, I was like, oh, kaiju are just politics, right? And if you hate politics, maybe you hate kaiju. Maybe there's that immediate turnoff. And then just right before you said it, it was like, oh, kaiju usually are like a macro problem. So I didn't think industrialization. I thought like Dracula, when he terrorizes, it's not like a country, sure, like Transylvania, but like beyond that, werewolves, it's usually territorial, right? So there's like a more animalistic nature to monsters, and now it's making me force my lean from our kaiju's monsters because of the last couple of minutes that I was zoned into and trying to avoid spoilers for Godzilla. As soon as this podcast is done, I'll just go watch it. But
you should. It's really good.
To answer most of your question, within the context of the monsters that I know, particularly African monsters, whether it's West African or Southern African, I don't know too much about Central Africa, but a lot of these monsters are shapeshifters. So like, I'm not gonna ramble off random names, and you're gonna be like, yeah, Africa. Let's stick to monsters that are universally known. Like Dracula shapeshifts, werewolves shapeshift. Like most other like classic monsters have a coin flip. Even Jekyll and Hyde, kind of monsterish, has this inverted nature. And I think the reason why I picked these pages, right? So obviously the cover, because the Kickstarter is going on right now, but like there is a formlessness to Tokoloshi, which is what's very scary about them. Between Ben and Gretchen speaking on their points, and I think more so Ben, of we're willing to wade, like I'm obviously like zoning in on one thing you said, but we're willing to wade through a very dark room and bump into things, right? To find the light switch and then give everything sense and be like, oh, this in relation to this, and just like context of our situation, right? And I think the example that you gave for Dracula is great. But a lot of the monsters that you find in African folklore don't really have that euphoric, or euphoria is not the right word, that feeling you get when you're relieved, that feeling of
The
relief. where you're like,
catharsis.
the catharsis, thank you. You don't get that catharsis of, oh, okay, she lives in the end, or that's how you defeat it. No, like most African monsters, it's done. Like, don't do that, because everyone who survived that didn't do that. Like black people at the start of a horror movie, nah, son.
Nope.
I want to clarify quickly. I don't think that survival is not necessary for catharsis. The horror movie, the horror story can end with everyone dead, and that can be satisfying as long as we, the audience, receive satisfaction of comprehension. And within a morality tale context, I think that we necessarily have to get that comprehension. We have to get that satisfaction, because at the end of the story, we have learned if you do this action, then the monster will get you. If you don't do this action, then you will be safe from the monster. And that's what we want. We don't really care whether the character in the story lives or dies. We care whether we're going to live or die when we encounter that monster.
See, you're right. And I'm glad you touched on that. And Bill, I'm glad you said it too, because I was thinking that this whole time, because I'm a black dude from Chicago. Every time I watch either a monster movie or kaiju, whatever, the first thing I'm thinking, like, I get a different approach to it, I think, because sometimes I'm just like, no, I'm a black ass wouldn't even be there.
No, thank you.
Like, I'm not going to that. No, I'm not going to check that out. I'm not answering the door. Yes, I will leave the house. All of those things are just, it's, I don't know. It might be a different perspective, maybe, but that's not the conversation we're having. We'll have that on another day. But I did want to add that. But please do tell us about this project that I have up on the screen.
So sorry. All I heard in my mind while you were speaking was, "Brother, don't do that. That's 5 to 10." So with the project that I'm working on right now, I really wanted to demystify, give context, like everything that we've spoken about here is absolutely fuel for the story. So thanks for being co-writers, kind of. Tokoloshi in Southern African lore have always had a word-of-mouth, broken telephone spine to them. Like, there's one image, there's one core image. Like, if you Google Tokoloshi right now, there's one image. And nobody agrees with that being the image, because the way that they were told the story doesn't fit with the shape that is on Wikipedia. And then that's also because of the regional cultural differences, the way stories are told. Some were told in a completely urban setting, others in a rural setting. And a friend of mine, so if you listen to any of the adverts that are running, sorry that you've had to see the advert 80 times, but if you listen to any of the folklore behind them, it'll be protect yourself with salt, which is standard to most monsters for some reason. I can get to that in another podcast. But the other one is bricks. Like raise your bed on bricks, and that'll protect you from Tokoloshi. It becomes this like square ward. But the more logical one is like to get your bed off the floor, because they usually have fires inside of the huts, and then the CO2, and it's a whole other thing, right? And again, it's all warnings. But a friend of mine literally saw the ad for the book, and she sent a photo of her bed, and she's like, no one told me why I needed to put the bricks here. It's not just a practice that her whole family does. And they'll say, you'll learn this when you're older. And even like the granddaddies were like, we don't know why we do this anymore, but we're just going to continue to do this because that's what other people are doing. And it forms that cultural framework of just keep yourself safe by following the rules and the lore. And in juxtaposition to that, I didn't want to have this fixed shape for Tokoloshi. So on the cover, it's just this waft with eyes and teeth, because there's just a weirdness of like looking into a monster's eyes and seeing thought, right? Like there's that moment of like pupil dilation of, I don't know whether you consider me food, friend, foe, or otherwise. And then teeth, just because what monster doesn't have? I'm sure there's a monster that does not have teeth.
Right, but, there's probably a monster that just gums you to death.
Please, that is just the worst way to go. Just, for 3 working days.
Yeah.
And so every he threw me off. So
Sorry.
every time that I've drawn the Tokoloshi, those are the two core aspects that I've kept is the eyes and the teeth. Everything else can change because where you hear it, how you hear it, why you hear about Tokoloshi for the first time, all changes. And I really wanted to also go in the Japanese direction of how do I make this cool, right? Because now there's this like deep fear. Like talk to anyone in this region of the world and ask them about Tokoloshi. Yo, we don't do that here, right? We don't like even me making this story. People are like, are you sure? Right? Because it's still like it's still in. I'm telling you, the number of times that people are like, brother, man,
don't do it. Why are you opening? Why are you opening that door? Yeah,
you get the bricks.
I'm going to.
I got bricks yesterday. So for the purposes of this, I also wanted to make it cool. So usually when a monster dies, it dies. But we've talked about how there's this closeness of like monster-like, and then animal, and then other, right? It's that sliding scale. And immediately, right, touching the animal part, I wanted to ask, like, what does it mean if I took the pelt of a monster and I started using it? Does the supernatural elements still live within the skin because of the undead nature of it? Like, if I remove the parts that make it think, right, heart, brain, and anything else, can I now use the abilities of that monster? It would be horrific for me to ask about Dracula because Dracula looks so much like a human, right? And we don't do that anymore. But with this, like I really like when I drew this, I didn't even know what the rest of the story was going to be. I drew this page first because I was like, if I could wear a monster as a pelt, and that pelt gave me the powers to then fight kaiju. So these two panels are a character that isn't in the story quite yet. It's just foreshadowing. It's just like I'm gonna put on like the skin of this werewolf and I'm gonna go fight kaiju, and that is the heart of the story. And the best part is that I'm a discovery writer, so I'm having fun. Like, oh damn, that's why these two people know each other. Damn, oh that's how that works. Okay, Lordy, right? And I like, again, because I'm a discovery writer, I don't have like a completely solid framework for where the story is going. It's this, cemented slurry, and everything that everyone has said here, Gretchen, Ben, Patrick, big host, man, I have been inspired. It is starting to solidify through conversations like this. So continue to do what you do because wow, like every word that came out of here, whether it was academic, spiritual, or the freak off, man, I'm feeling
it. Fantastic. And actually, that sounds really cool. But I do want to add to this conversation just a little bit because I don't think we touched on it yet. But with something like this is considered more of a Lovecraftian creature. And when we start talking about Cthulhu and things of this nature, like, there's a lot of teeth, and sometimes they don't even have forms whatsoever. So, like, these are definitely considered monsters, right?
Oh, that's Ben.
Yeah, so I was thinking about Lovecraft and about cosmic horror because I was talking about the reason that we're scared is that resolution of understanding. In cosmic horror, by definition, you can never understand Cthulhu. You can never understand these creatures.
Right.
And that is what is most terrifying about them.
Do we even know their purpose?
No.
Okay.
No, for most of them, they exist on a scale and on a plane that is beyond our understanding, and anyone who tries to understand them goes mad. In Lovecraft's narrators are always mad because they have tried to comprehend the incomprehensible. And I think that unequivocally those creatures are monsters. And to bring it back to kaiju, most of my kaiju knowledge is specific to Godzilla. So if this is not true of other kaiju, I apologize. But Godzilla, I think, Patrick, you were talking about are typhoons monsters,
Right.
because they destroy cities, and Godzilla can kind of be viewed as a personified typhoon. And the Godzilla stories that I have seen, there's never really a question about who Godzilla is or why Godzilla is. That Godzilla in Godzilla -1 is the result of nuclear testing in the Bikini Atoll, and that is why Godzilla. And that question that in Carol's understanding of horror is the entire purpose, that question is negated in the same way that it's negated in cosmic horror, but it's negated in the opposite direction, where Lovecraft says the question of why doesn't matter because you can never have the answer. Godzilla says the question of why doesn't matter because here's the answer right at the start, and it doesn't matter. You can understand why Godzilla, and Godzilla is still going to destroy Tokyo. There's nothing that you can do to stop this force of nature once it has been awoken.
Okay.
In several,
That's
I was
well,
going to say, in several personifications of Godzilla has been, he's been everything from an amoeba to a lizard that was evolved. So it's,
Okay.
he doesn't have any, these are my examples that are not Godzilla.
I know that's why I did it. But no, I have a point for this. I want you to continue because I'd like to hear from you specifically and from Patrick, because you just touched on it. Really, that Godzilla was the result of a nuclear accident. He's been an amoeba, all sorts of things. So, like, from your knowledge, are kaiju mostly just made in some way, like an accident, or whereas like we've talked about how monsters will come with a sort of purpose or sort of lore, the kaiju that I can think of so far seem to have been like accidentally man-made or purposely made and then gone awry. Is that correct? Or what are your thoughts on that?
No, I mean they're kind of varied. Like these two are from outer space. This is Pigmon and Busca. They're from the Ultraman series, like an offshoot of Ultraman series stuff. They're technically even called pocket monsters, kind of at times in Japanese. This was going to be my example of like when a kaiju is also a monster as well.
Either way, I don't want to die by this because I feel like that's going to be embarrassing. And but also, like, what are their powers?
But also
like, what are
cute.
They are cute, but like I don't want to be like, oh man, you kind of cute, and then they just maul me.
Well, these guys are like not really like, they're pretty benign as far as kaiju. Some kaiju are kind of benign, and they're just kind of corralled like cats.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How about this other example you have here? Tell me about this.
Sibuzu. He is from the Graveyard Planet. He's an Ultraman villain. He just wanted to go back to, he is basically undead and wanted to go back to his graveyard planet. And that was the point of the entire episode, is sending this one character back to his planet. And he has like kind of ray powers and different iterations of him later. But like, yeah, he is pretty much just a slightly benign force. That's why I kind of wanted to show some of these more fun kaiju that are like less of the, monstrous ones as well, but they're also considered monsters by Japanese culture because this guy is kind of a yokai style beast. He has, he's undead. He's also a little bit like Obake, like as in a ghost, but he's also a skeleton and a kaiju.
See, I'm glad you said that because he just fits into all the categories that all of you have mentioned so far.
Right.
So
there's no morality tale to him. He's quite benign. He just like wants to go back to his home, and he got stuck here.
Is this also him right here?
That's him battling Ultraman. Yeah, and that's to scale to show you that they're giant. They're kaiju.
And see, which also brings me.
You can see his zipper in this.
Fantastic. It's like right there. It's like right there in the butthole too. Yeah.
Right? How dare you?
But this does. It's something I've been thinking about. something I've been thinking about since Bill said it. With them being giant, like as soon as he said it, like imagine like a frost giant from Marvel fighting Ultraman.
They have one. It's called Woo. His name is Woo. He's like a giant abominable snowman.
I know that snowman.
Yeah,
I know which one
Woo.
you're talking about. That's fantastic.
Yeah, guys, by the way, I know way too much about kaiju movies. I'm high.
I had brought up one too because we were talking about that. These are monsters from Kamen Rider, and for the most part, these are not giant.
No, they are called kaijin.
Interesting.
So they are kaiju humanoid variations. So they're called kaijin. Kamen Rider Blaq was a series that kind of touched on this, and he also brought in like a socio-political aspect about like immigration into the series. It kind of got really dark there for a minute.
Wow.
Using kaijin as an example, like for integration into society.
Wow. Okay. You know, and people always, you know, this is the kind of thing where people always crack me up, like especially nerds in the nerd circuit always like, why are you always putting politics in my nerddom? I'm like, it started there. It always started there.
Right?
Like,
well, it's one of our societal fears. I mean, horror movies are always a reflection of human fears.
Exactly.
In many ways.
So, okay.
I'm an African.
You know, I think the weather's exactly the same for some reason. No.
Are you having a rainy day, Bill?
I mean, it doesn't rain down in Africa.
Wow, stop.
This was a great talk.
I almost spit this coffee. I'm so glad I wasn't drinking. I'm so glad I wasn't drinking this.
Please continue.
Well played, Bill. Well played.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
This was fun, everyone. I'm gonna go. That was.
This was a.
There you go. Wow.
Okay, Patrick. I've pulled up your example here. Please tell us about this wonderful piece of art that I'm looking at.
So this is an illustration from my graphic novel, A Tiger's Tale, which starts in the mundane world and works its way up till the realm of myth and legends. And so what I have here are my interpretation of the Chinese long, which is dragon in English, right?
Okay.
So I call them the long dragon. And I bring it up because I remember what Bill was saying about, giant monsters and, is a giant toothy creature a monster? And here's the interesting thing that differentiates the long dragon from Asia, also present in Japan, from the European fire-breathing dragon or drake, right? Is that long dragons are considered part of the workings of the universe. Right. So they are in charge of rain. They are in charge of the weather. So if a typhoon levels the city and it's the work of a long dragon, right, then chances are someone or someone's within that city offended the dragon, because the dragon within this mythology represents like the peak of wisdom and the peak of like working within a cosmic bureaucracy, right? So it kind of also touches on like the nature of Confucianism and how people, like how a culture, interacts with its mythology and its society as compared to, more Western thinkings of giant monsters. And so, it's an interesting question because categorically, you can consider a dragon a kaiju. They're big, they're toothy, but perhaps the difference is like where they, reside within the functioning of, that reality, that universe.
Okay. I really I like that. I like the addition of that. It makes a lot of sense to me, and again, I can see a lot of the crossover. Actually, I have been watching an anime series recently called Fire Hunters, and they incorporate the lore of which you just mentioned, that like the dragons serve a purpose, and things are being chaotic right now because someone in each of these villages have offended them in some way, and that's the cause of the turmoil. Let me see if I have yeah, whatever. But anyway, this is the book you're working on now. Is this the one that's up on Kickstarter now? Is it?
This one is not up on Kickstarter. Well, it's available because my current comic, Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer, is kind of like a little bit of a horror story that segues into the larger graphic novel series, right? If the graphic novel series is about exploring a universe that, is something has gone wrong in the clockwork mechanisms of the universe, and so Tiger's Tail is looking at that. Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer is like an on-the-ground report of what's going wrong in the world. So if you'll indulge me, I could show you a page from...
Yeah, please, by all means. And while you're looking at that, I did want to talk about this real quick as well. Has anybody here... Well, actually, if you have it ready, go for it. I'll wait.
Here it is. It's right here. Sorry, the gremlins are protesting, but I'm muscling through.
There it is.
And so here is a page from the
wow.
comic that's currently on Kickstarter. It's called Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer. And here, these are our antagonists, right? So from what we've learned so far, they are what we would call yaoguai, or in Japanese, yokai.
Okay.
But this is the Chinese equivalent of a vampire, right? They're called jiangshi. And so the loosest translation you can think of is that they are Chinese hopping vampires. Because of rigor mortis, right? They are undead creatures who have come back to life, but they do not suck blood in the traditional sense. They absorb life force, right? The chi of people. So when they are initially resurrected, they're very stiff. Rigor mortis has set in, so they hop. But as they absorb chi, right? Because chi also translates to breath. So as people panic around them and their breathing changes, the jiangshi get stronger, and that hopping gets higher, until eventually they can fly.
That's terrifying. Damn, son. Like, I don't know how I feel. Like, I've already don't like the idea of like a vampire coming up to suck my blood. But if I saw a motherfucker hopping at me, it's just like, and then I start to feel weird just because they're around. And oh man.
Yeah,
it's like the start of a Missy Elliott song. Sorry, go ahead.
No, what was that, Bill?
It's the start of a Missy Elliott song. Heavy breathing while dancing.
Oh yeah, I don't like it. I mean, I like it, but
they're much more dangerous in enclosed places where the air is limited. But then, as they get stronger, they become, formidable enough to, float around at nights. And now here's the interesting thing, right? This monster is rooted in ancient practices of corpse walking, right? So if we can think of China during the 5 empires period, before China was unified into a single empire, there was like massive wars. And part of the belief system was that if you were to die, right, the only proper burial would be that you be buried in your family lot, right? You be buried in your home soil, which ties into a little bit of the Dracula mythology of Dracula needing his own soil to sleep in, right? And so what would happen is that there would be Taoist priests that would be hired to walk the corpse back to their hometown. And they would do this by taking like bamboo poles and tying it on the bottoms of the corpse's arms so that two people can carry it on their shoulder and walk it the hundreds of miles it would take to get back to that body's hometown.
Whoa.
Wow.
Of course, they would have to do this at night so as to not terrify any of the people that they passed by. But this was the origins of the mythology of these corpses hopping, because at night, if you would see them, you'd see these silhouettes hopping along the roadway with the arms stretched out because they're tied to poles.
You know what's real
Wow, I did not
interesting?
know that. That's cool.
That is very cool. You know,
What's-
it actually.
sorry.
No,
There's
go
something
ahead.
real interesting about what Patrick just said. Is like there's like a line where fantasy meets sci-fi, and the other side of sci-fi is just science, right? And as you were talking about the hopping and the rigor mortis, I was like, that's too much of like practicality for that to be like someone's imagination. Like
Mhm.
as soon as you started talking about like the limitations based on breathing rigor mortis, I was like, okay, you're eventually going to spin back and talk about how this actually came about as a practice, and like that's the most interesting part for me. Sorry to interrupt you, Cerius.
It was like
no.
werewolves were probably people who were not buried deeply enough in the ground. And so their bodies were found by animals and dug up and dragged away. So you bury a person and then you come back a week later and there's just a big hole in the ground covered in claw marks where the body was. That person clearly turned into an animal, dug themselves out, and now they're off in the woods.
And since we're that's thank you for bringing that up, Ben, because I was actually going to mention something like that myself. One of the things that I know that we haven't touched on a lot because we've been focusing on, like, there's so many different cultures that we could touch on, but like this falls into the cryptid category because this is supposed to be a chupacabra, you know. And when you get into Latin lore or Hispanic lore or stuff like that, there's a whole lot of I feel like this goes back to the cultural references where there's a little bit more explanation, but you still don't get an answer towards the end. Like, because you think about Wendigos or chupacabras, stuff like that, and they are monsters, but they also bring a message. But that being said, you know, because when I thought about this, like, what about something as simple as like a ghost, like La Llorona, you know, or you know, right? Like, are they? They're considered monsters. They're not kaiju. That's just a monster thing, right? So, leading us back to our ultimate question: where have we landed now? Because kaiju can be a lot of things. Now, we've outlined that they most of the time have been from some sort of man-made screw up in some way, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
But so can zombies. Never be from some man-made screw up.
Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah. You know, or if you start thinking about or I mean, and we haven't even talked about magic, because look at the Caribbean lore of zombies or vampires. You know, that's like rainbow. that's spell exactly. That's spell work and all sorts of stuff. Which is honestly, I feel like that's tied to like where we get stuff like the Crossroad Demons. This is when you start thinking of like, yeah. But okay. We're towards the end of our big session here. Where has let's go around and just tell me how you're feeling about this topic right now. And like, I'm not expecting you to have a solidified like thing, like, you know, nobody's gonna get thrown into a pit if you think otherwise. But I just want to know how you feel at the end of this. So, Patrick, let's start with you. How are you feeling after this lengthy discussion about whether kaiju should and can be considered monsters?
I think I'm of the opinion that like the word monster just really isn't large enough to encompass a kaiju completely. And I'm not just talking about like meters, you know, it's just like at this day and age, I think the kaiju has gone past monster as a term that we can use. Okay. And so Kaiju bigger than monster.
Okay, word up. Bill, how you feeling about all this? Because you've had to you took in a lot of info today.
Yeah, I'm still with Patrick. I don't think, because English is my dominant language, I don't think there's just enough words. So if you think of like Inuits and like how many words they have for just ice and slurry and snow, etc., I think we just need a broader wordscape of things that bracket and bookend the high and the low of what a monster could be. Kaiju, yes, absolutely a monster, but then it's just like with like ellipsis and a question mark. Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm just gonna go in this order here, Ben. So Gretchen, that leaves you last. So you think about what you want to say, Ben. You go ahead.
Yeah. So within genre theory, which is the academic study of how we break things down into categories, you can describe a category from the top down or the bottom up. You can kind of say, this is what the category means, and then take a thing and ask, does it fit into the category or not? And that method of categorization is not particularly useful. A much more meaningful method of categorization is to look at things which we all agree fit into a category, and then ask, why do these things fit into that category? And what is the understanding that all of these things are this larger category? What does that tell us about these things and about this category and about us? And so within that framework, I guess I reject the premise of the question and do not answer, because as Patrick and Bill both said, the category of kaiju and the category of monster, they are on different scales. And Gretchen has talked a lot about all of these different kaiju who have wildly different purposes within the narrative that they are in and within the larger meta text of what those narratives are trying to pursue. And so to try and categorize kaiju into monster would be akin to me to trying to categorize comics into superhero. Are there kaiju who are monsters? Yes. But are all kaiju categorically monsters? No.
Okay. GB, Gretchen, what you got?
Well, I mean, I'm going to stand firmly on my kaiju is a invention of a genre. It's a subgenre of a film, like a filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
It is primarily that, at least for the intents and purposes of this conversation. Are kaiju monstrous? Sure. If you asked probably the average Japanese person and said, tell me a monster, they would probably say Godzilla.
Okay. Yeah.
So
yeah, you're right. You're right. Actually, I've actually been part of that conversation. So you're absolutely right. Okay. Well, my answer, since nobody asked me,
hey,
is
Sean,
yeah.
tell us is kaiju a monster?
Okay. Sometimes. My answer is sometimes. It's like, this actually reminds me of somebody attacking me online once because I referred to a book and I said graphic novel instead of trade paperback, and they like lost their shit about it. And
God,
I was like,
how pedantic.
I was like, man, you know what I'm talking about. Man, get out of my face. But to me, that's where I land on it. I'm just like, I don't want to fight none of them. That's where my answer is. I don't want to fight any. I will fight this though. However, I will fight this. Has anybody here seen K-pop Demon Hunters?
Absolutely.
No, thank you.
Gretchen, you're missing out. You're missing out.
I'm sorry. I'm just not interested.
Yeah, you think
any of
You think any of us were? This wasn't on my list of things to be like, yeah, I'm down. But tell you what, it was dope.
I was definitely interested. I did not need to have my arm twisted to go watch that movie. That is everything that I'm looking for.
Gretchen, I'm putting you like this. There are at least 3 songs on this soundtrack that you're going to want on your gym playlist.
Wow.
I'm not a fan of musicals, but this story is so within my wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, the only difference between the specific demons that they're fighting and the Yaoguai that I've described is really just the pronunciation. When we think about like how monsters reflect or a dark reflection of societal values, you know, I just loved what this movie had to say.
Yeah, same. It had good cultural lore is the point. So my question for anybody who did see it, what are these? Are these yokai?
These are merchandise. That's what they is.
Right.
True.
They're toys.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I will buy one.
They would be the Korean pronunciation of yokai, which I could look up, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay. Okay, but they would be considered in that realm, right? Because that's what I was thinking.
That's what how
Yeah,
I would
or like
categorize.
Bakemono. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not seeing it, so I have nothing to draw on.
All right. Well, thank you for clearing that up for me, just because they had a different power set in the movie, and I really want to understand a little bit more. But I figured I would ask this panel of people. So, I got something out of this.
Well, I mean, it's just such a great example of like the specific nuances that, you know, how culture and storytelling can intersect to really reveal something that's just of its own sort.
Yeah. And we didn't even talk about demons.
No.
But maybe that'll be for a part 2, because I feel like we've touched base on a lot of things today. And maybe in the future, we'll dive more into cryptids, space creatures, and supernatural beings.
As long as I can talk about Squanch, I'm happy.
I mean, along those lines, I'd also be very interested in like the different monster hunting or kaiju hunting or yokai hunting techniques available to these genres.
Okay.
You know, a stake through the heart is nothing for Godzilla, you know.
We could also follow up. True. We could also follow up on the quote unquote heroes or monster fighters and their tools and weaponry. You know, like we could talk about how people have chosen to fight Godzilla, the things they've come up with to try to battle Dracula over the years, or all of the different cultural. Yes, Bill.
Is that garnet on your wall?
Yeah, man.
Okay, what?
Absolutely. But yeah, we'll have some follow-up discussions, and Slack Pack, if you're watching this, leave some comments into the video below, or you know what I'm saying. Do the YouTube thing and talk to us about what you would like to see specifically from this panel of people. If you'd like us to do a follow-up, let us know. Also keep in mind that there will be several links in the description here on where to follow each panel member and where to, you know, find their work. Make sure to look for these Kickstarters. Check my Instagram, because I'll be sharing things there. Check my Blue Sky, all of that stuff. Make sure to support these Kickstarters. Is there anything that anybody would like to say as a final word?
Clifford is not a kaiju.
Which one?
Clifford is not a kaiju.
Clifford is not. Okay. Good point. But could we make that happen?
No.
Damn.
That's a tweet. That's a tweet. You put the big caption link to this.
It's always kind of a thing among kaiju nerds, like, is Clifford a kaiju? I'm like, no, he's not even a daikaiju. Let's just leave it alone. Clifford is yeah.
I hadn't thought about that, but thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
You're welcome. There's your brain scratcher.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. I really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Each one of you have opened my eyes to a lot of things, and I hope you've inspired each other.
Absolutely.
I wanted to check out the book Ben keeps popping up with the philosophy of horror. I mean, I have like a bunch of books like that, and I was like, well, it's in my wheelhouse. I'm reading that next.
It is definitely an academic tome. I don't want people to go into it thinking it's going to be a really fun read, but it is.
You should read The Difference of Dread.
Yeah. By the way, Patrick, I meant to tell you, I love the title of your book on Kickstarter. It just hits the right way. Yeah. And Bill, I'm looking forward to receiving my book from you. In fact, I'll back both of those. You'll see my name pop up.
This was such an absolute pleasure. Ben, I'm so glad that you like jumped at the chance to kind of make this happen when the opportunity arose. And yeah, great pleasure to meet those of you who I'm meeting here for the first time. You know, although like
same.
Bill, your work precedes you, so I'm so glad that we had a chance to talk.
Me too. I know that I came on as like a fifth ranger at the end of this to fight this kaiju discussion, but it was absolutely really like it's been inspiring. I will follow all of you somehow, not in a creepy way, not in like a Kappa freak off kind of way, just like a regular, you know, follow you, see what you're up to.
Leave my short pajama alone.
You did this.
I will follow all of you in the weird, creepy way. That's...
Yeah, I'm already following all of you.
I'm already following Patrick.
Yeah. So I'm already following all of you in a weird, creepy way. That's my creepy laugh. All right, we're gonna get out of here. I'm gonna stop the video here now, and thank you, Slack Pack, for watching. I'm gonna end this up. You guys don't leave the studio. I want to chat with you, and I will see y'all at a later date. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.